Welcome to True Crime Cases Today. We are unveiling a shocking story of jealousy. The village was devastated when the body This is the tale of how a 19-year-old was found under startling and strange circumstances. Jonathan was the murderous spouse of a 65-year-old Bailey and a teenage groom. Jonathan, a modest and reserved 19-year-old who was reared in Cottonwood, Arizona, a tiny community. In May 2021, Jonathan had recently graduated from high school, where he was regarded as the quiet child who constantly carrying a guitar when many of his peers were getting ready for college or beginning their careers. Jonathan had a passion, but was still unsure of what he wanted to pursue with his life. Liked music and hoped to pursue a career in it, but he wasn't sure how to get there yet. Jonathan's wish came true when he and his mother, Kehlani Jonathan, moved into a little trailer on the edge of Kehlani town's financial circumstances were difficult, and Kehlani, a single mother, had found it difficult to make. Jonathan spent the majority of her life making ends meet, particularly after she lost her work as a result of the economic slump that, because of their financial struggles brought on by the epidemic, Jonathan was a quiet person who felt obligated to assist his mother, who was heavily indebted. He had a kind heart and was the kind of person who would go above and beyond to assist others when he was. Jonathan was in a peculiar predicament in the days before his death, battling himself. Jonathan. He had married Bailey, a 65-year-old retired Harris Bailey, a week prior. Bailey was well known for her lavish lifestyle and had already been married several times. Therefore, she insisted on a lavish wedding, which occurred at a posh resort in the neighboring city of Sedona. The wedding was lavish and costly. Decor, a cuisine created by Gorham, and a custom-made couture wedding gown by Bailey. However, groom Jonathan didn't seem comfortable at the occasion. He looked anxious and uncertain about the entire circumstance. The unexpected declaration of his marriage to 65-year-old Jer Hartford arrived at. Everyone who knew him was shocked, and many pondered what may have happened to the kind, reserved Jonathan. Others hypothesized that his mother's financial difficulties had anything to do with his making such a radical choice. Others worried that he was being duped, but Jonathan and Bailey's connection wasn't only out of the ordinary. Bailey was a demanding and bossy person who frequently had tantrums due to their age gap. When her conduct became more and more overwhelming to Jonathan and things didn't go her way, he told his mother about his uncertainties and anxieties, but Kehlani urged him to remain in the marriage, which caused Jonathan to feel caught between his mother's desires and his developing. Jonathan was still adjusting to his new existence at the time of his death, which caused him discomfort. In actuality, he spent most of his time with Bailey at his new house and had distanced himself from his buddies. He was a young man who had lost his ambition of becoming a musician, and it felt farther away than ever. Unable to see a future that made sense to him. On October 8, 2021, the finding. Around 8:30 a.m., a somber discovery rocked the community of Sedona. Marjorie Lane, and the neighbor, who is 82, was on her morning stroll when she became aware of something strange at the opulent residence. The front door of Hartford Jonathan was slightly open, and the curtains were drawn. Marjorie, who thought this strange, especially considering that Judd was well known in the area after more than 30 years. Marjorie was intrigued and worried since she followed a rigid schedule and typically kept things in order. Wanted to check on the home. She yelled out as she got closer, but no one answered. As soon as she entered, she detected a strong, unpleasant fragrance, and that's when she saw Jonathan collapsed against the couch, laying still on the living room floor. A number of half-empty pill bottles, all of which contained prescription drugs, were strewn all around him. Beside him, on the coffee table, was a glass of water. Marjorie was stunned and her heart was racing. Having known Jonathan, she was shocked by what she was witnessing and hurried to wipe away her tears. She pulled out her phone and phoned 911, her hands shaking as she relayed the address to the operator. When the 911 operator requested Marjorie to look for signs of life, she paused before sharing what she had discovered, but followed instructions. kneeling next to Jonathan and giving him a little shoulder shake while yelling his name. Remained silent. She could see that his lips were a shade of blue, his face was pale, and his respiration had stopped Marjorie's thoughts from racing, recalling the wedding that had taken place a week prior, where Jonathan had appeared completely out of place next to the much older Bailey in her lavish wedding dress. Tears were flowing down her cheeks as she tried to comprehend how everything had gone so bad so fast. Remained speaking with the 911 operator until the ambulances and cops arrived. Jonathan was promptly pronounced dead at the scene, and Marjorie, startled and distraught, was led outside where she sat on the sidewalk and gazed at the home where Jonathan's early life had ended in tragedy. The exam. Just before 9 o'clock, police officers showed up to the Hartford Jonathan house. On October 8, 2021, taking the lead, Detective Marla Grundle, a seasoned investigator with the Sedona Police, conducted the investigation. Detective Grundle wasted, a department renowned for her keen intuition and no-nonsense approach, spending little time evaluating the situation with Officer Tom Jenkins, a youthful yet motivated recruit. They went inside the living room of the house that was suddenly the focus of a terrible mystery. The opulent furnishings and elegant decor contrasted with the strangely silent environment where Jonathan's body was discovered. Grunwald, the detective, saw the motionless body on the floor in striking contrast. She noticed the glass of water on the coffee table and the prescription bottles strewn all around Jonathan. Prescription labeling for pharmaceuticals like OxyContin and Sanx, which are frequently linked to overdose situations. The actual scene was very clear. There were no traces of conflict, overturned furniture, or blood. Detective Grunwald had concerns since it was nearly too tidy. The neatness implied that whatever had occurred was the consequence of a more planned occurrence rather than an unexpected, chaotic one. Officer Jenkins was instructed by Detective Grunwell to start taking pictures of the situation while she phoned. The coroner, Dr. Evelyn, arrived with a forensics team to collect evidence and dust for fingerprints. She examined the body soon after and determined that Jonathan had most likely overdosed to death, although it was evident that this was no accident because the quantity of narcotics found was far more than the advised limit. Detective Grunwald's attention was captured by a wedding detail as they proceeded with their inquiry. Jonathan's countenance was detached in the picture of him and Bailey on the mantel. In sharp contrast to Bailey's radiant grin, her eyes were downcast. This was a striking indicator of SLE. The forensics team meticulously gathered the pill, indicating that everything was amiss in this new lured family. Bottles, the water glass, and any other possible proof. They also detected a little perfume set. Detective Gerald noticed a fragrance in the air that he recognized as Bailey's characteristic. By the time they concluded Detective Graham Wall, they were wearing a fragrance from a high-end brand on Channel 5. Became more convinced that this was more than a simple overdose, since the evidence suggested foul play. As the inquiry into Noah Beasley's death progressed, the probe was only getting started. The police focused on the most apparent suspect, Bailey's affection for Jonathan. In Sedona, Jonathan's 65-year-old wife Bailey was well known for leading an opulent lifestyle. With strong character, born into affluence, Jerry has been married several times, each union ending. Bailey was famous for her tantrums during a rough divorce and was fixated on being young. Zillow's image as a bride was well-deserved, as she demanded, but things didn't go her way. Everyone around her gave her nothing but perfection. When Detective Mara Grunwald, an officer, later that day, Tom Jenkins came to Bailey's house and saw her relaxing by the pool a little distance from her husband's grave, enjoying a mimosa and looking through the most recent issue of Vogue. Despite the sad events, Bailey appeared eerily composed while wearing a fashionable outfit. With her big sunglasses and captain, she gave off a detached vibe that attracted the detective's attention right away. When Grunwald turned to face the cops, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. When questioned about what transpired before Jonathan passed away, she said that she had gone to bed early the evening before she left Jonathan to play his own computer games in the living room. She said that she thought he had slept on the bed when she woke up that morning, and didn't see him there. And when she learned of his passing, she seemed surprised and a little upset, but not especially distressed, as though she had learned that a friend's fat had died while being questioned by Bailey's. Tale stayed the same, but her emotionless demeanor suggested that she was obliging yet aloof. In responding to inquiries concerning the pill bottles discovered at the location with practiced precision, Scenario Bailey mentioned that Jonathan had been having difficulties lately and had been given medicine to assist him in coping. She maintained that she was unaware that he may overdose and proposed that maybe Jonathan had. Despite her calm attitude, the investigator took more tablets than he should have in a moment of despair. Gumel pointed up several contradictions in Bailey's account. For example, Bailey had stated that Jonathan was playing video games, but when Marjorie Lenny found the deceased, the TV was off. In addition, since the main bedroom was unaltered, it's possible that Bailey didn't go to bed at all, which makes investigative work much more intriguing. The more Grunwald probed, the more obvious it was that Bailey was concealing something, although without specific. Her alibi appeared to be flawless, but her actions created a trail that the police were unable to follow. Lingering doubt that investigator Grunwald was unable to get rid of after the questioning. The impression that this elegant, glitzy woman had a greater role in Jonathan's demise, and that she revealed the second suspects. As long as Bailey Hartford Jonathan was still a suspect, the police focused on the 49-year-old mother of second suspect Kilani Jonathan. Jonathan has experienced more than her fair share of hardships. Many difficulties. Her life had consisted of a string of poor choices, each one appearing to be worse than the one before it. Due to her crippling debt, Kilani had turned to selling prescription medications illegally. Having been detained several times, she had managed to conceal a secret from most people, but not all of them. Detective Mara complained that she was aware that Kilani may have pushed Jonathan because of her desperation into his doomed engagement with Bailey, which provided Kilani with a lifeline out of her. Despite her financial difficulties, she couldn't resist the temptation to believe that her future would be secured by her son's marriage. But at what cost? Kilani looked harried and anxious as the police took her in for interrogation. She stood in sharp contrast to Bailey's immaculate appearance, wearing tattered jeans and a t-shirt. Kilani lit a cigarette, a habit she had resumed in recent months, with trembling hands. When Kilani's voice faltered while responding to the detective's inquiries, she acknowledged that she had urged. Mary mentioned the wedding that took place there, and Jonathan painted it as an occasion he couldn't pass up. Jonathan had felt out of place in the lavish Sedona resort where Kilani claimed to have felt Bailey could provide her and her son money, and she wanted the best for him. Something she had never been able to supply, but when the topic of discussion turned to the Kilani grew combative when narcotics were discovered at the scene and claimed any knowledge of the enormous number of killings, claiming that Jonathan had to have received them from somewhere and taken them himself. Detective Grunwald, however, wasn't persuaded by Kilani's financial difficulties or her engagement with her desperate attempt to protect her future, and her unlawful drug sales indicated her engagement under pressure. Kilani started to respond in unpredictable ways and even contradicted herself at one point, saying she claimed to have seen Jonathan the night before he passed away, after not seeing him for days. Despite her protestations, the police's suspicions are only strengthened by her uneasiness and contradictory remarks. Kilani's involvement with drugs and her obvious desire to keep Jonathan's marriage intact caused her. Grundle, a major suspect investigator, was aware of Kilani's craftiness, brutality, and willingness to go to any lengths to protect. As the questioning came to a finish, they were closer to disintegrating, even at the cost of her own son. The truth. But there were still unanswered questions regarding Bailey Hartford Jonathan, and with Kilani Jonathan under investigation, the authorities focused on Harry Hartford, a third suspect. The third allegation. Harry, Bailey's 70-year-old ex-husband, was a prosperous real estate tycoon who was known for being merciless in both his personal and professional life. His most recent endeavor was creating retirement communities in Arizona, a successful enterprise that had only helped him grow his empire. Harry's only a few months before to her marriage, her relationship with Bailey had ended in a harsh divorce. Jonathan, but the divorce had been widely reported and discussed in Arizona's most exclusive social circles. Kuru had left Harry feeling ashamed and enraged after taking a substantial amount of his riches. Jonathan's marriage to Bailey coincided with a much younger boy toy, which further aggravated Harry's. He was a key suspect in the detective's inquiry because of his envy and lingering hatred. When Marlo Grunwald and Officer Tom Jenkins arrived, they made the decision to interview Harry. They discovered him in his home office at his expansive estate, surrounded by court records and architectural plans. Harry shook hands firmly and confidently as he welcomed them. Being in charge, in contrast to Kehlani's anxious and tense state, Harry was almost. During the interview, Harry cooperated as though anticipating their presence, but his responses were restrained, and he acknowledged that Gertrude's recent marriage had angered him. He denied any involvement in it, calling it a slap in my bleeping face. After his passing, Harry clarified that he had been preoccupied with his career and had not spent much time with. On the evening of Jonathan's divorce, Bailey or Jonathan was questioned about his whereabouts. Harry gave a convincing alibi by saying he attended a business dinner in Phoenix. Several well-known guests may attest to his attendance with possible investors, making. Despite his assistance, Detective Grundle found it impossible to refute his alibi. Dispel the suspicion that Harry was concealing something. His composure was almost too cultivated, as though he had practiced his answers, given that he had been spotted bickering with Bailey only a few days prior. Only strengthened the belief that, before to Jonathan's passing, there had been a furious argument between. Harry allegedly informed Gertrude that she would regret their meeting at a nearby country club. Divorce. But the police lacked sufficient proof to detain Harry, which may have been the reason. The inquiry was far from over, and envy and retaliation had him squarely in their sights. On October 15, 2021, detectives complained that they needed to look further to find the truth, exactly as the crucial piece of fresh evidence surfaced when the inquiry appeared to be stagnating. It was a chilly. Sedona detective Marlo Grundle was at the station on a lovely afternoon when clouds started to develop above the city. Officer Tom Jenkins hurried in with a sealed package as they were going over the case files again. That morning, it was handed to the station anonymously, which immediately raised suspicions there. The USB thumb drive that was inside the mail had a startling number of text messages. Days before to Jonathan's passing, Jude Hartford Jonathan and an unidentified acquaintance dated. Texts described Jude's strategy to separate from Jonathan and remove him from her while using her awareness of Kehlani Jonathan's illicit drug use as leverage in court. The messages were interspersed with Bailey's annoyance over Jonathan's sullen demeanor and poor sex. Sex with her spouse is so vanilla, and she is becoming impatient to get rid of him. The new proof. His bleep is smaller than my ring finger, according to one post. Another terrifying text said, if that bleep. Kehlani believes she is getting away with this bleep, but I'll make sure she doesn't. Important information about Gertrude's mental state was revealed by her, and that little bleep paid the signals. And her goals. It became evident that she had been planning to destroy both Jonathan and Kehlani from her life, but the statement also suggests that a third party may have been involved. She assisted Bailey in gathering information on the detective who was supplying prescription drugs to Janice. Grunwald and her group started investigating the communications source right once after learning that, in reality, the anonymous contact was one of Gertrude's private detectives, whom she had engaged to do. In the days prior to Kehlani's marriage to Jonathan, this investigator had discovered Kehlani's drug trafficking history and was providing Bailey with the data she required to carry out her scheme. The new Bailey was portrayed by the evidence as a cunning and vindictive individual who was prepared to any measures to obtain what she desired, which also brought into doubt Kehlani's involvement in Jonathan's. Was Kehlani only a pawn in Gertrude's scheme, or had she discovered it and acted in desperation? With this new information in hand, the police in Gertrude's twisted game increased their attention on both. The research got more urgent for Bailey and Kehlani as it became apparent that the truth was far more intricate than anybody had first thought, but the parts were beginning to fit together. Hey, true crime case solvers interested in more real life. The whole narrative hasn't been released yet. The turning point. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel if you're interested in murder mysteries. What do you think? Please leave a comment if you have any questions concerning this case or a situation of your own that you would want us to look into. On October 20th, 2021, as the inquiry approached its breaking point, safe true crime case solvers. When investigator Mara Gumbold examined the text messages discovered, he had a breakthrough. It was evident from looking through the USB drive and comparing it to the phone records that Kehlani had been exploiting her son as a sexual pawn in the fatal scheme, which was orchestrated by Nova's own mother. The police now had sufficient evidence to arrest Kehlani Jonathan, 49, out of desperation and greed. Kehlani was a lady who believed that life was a never-ending battle that was plagued by debt and plagued by bad decisions. She was certain that Jonathan's marriage to Gertrude would help her escape financial catastrophe. Who was not recognized for having a sexual interest in women, would abandon Bailey, breaking Kehlani's hopes for a consistent flow of income. To make sure that wouldn't occur, Kehlani had been surreptitiously feeding prescription medications and sexual enhancers were used by Jonathan to maintain his compliance and sexual performance, when Jonathan unintentionally took significantly more than she had planned, the plan went horribly wrong. The revelation that Bailey was dissatisfied with Jonathan's lack of sexual zeal was the twist. Since a spouse had been preparing to file for divorce and remove Kehlani from both of their lives, she had learned about Kehlani's drug usage and planned to exploit that knowledge to prevent them from taking her money. However, in a desperate attempt to preserve the marriage, Kehlani took matters into her own hands the evening of. Kehlani had given Jonathan a higher dosage of the medication in an attempt to soothe him before his death. But Jonathan, he took even more drugs since he was upset about his loveless marriage and worried about Bailey's cruelty. Kehlani didn't want to murder her kid, yet her actions directly caused him to overdose and die. Caused his death when Kehlani first denied everything when the police presented her with the proof. In sharp contrast to her prior calm, but as a detective, her behavior was frenetic and terrified. Kehlani's defenses broke down when Grunwald revealed the damaging phone records and messages, she said. She kept her kid in the marriage until they could have their own, but she never meant to murder him. Financial future, the little communities of Sedona and Kay were rocked by Kehlani's imprisonment. The revelation that Jonathan's own mother had brought about shattered his family. His passing further rocked the town, which had already been rocked by the strange marital conditions. Pondering the terrible fact that desperation and avarice had caused such an unnecessary loss as Kehlani was taken away in handcuffs, she seemed numb and unable to completely understand the seriousness of what she had done. The grieving Jonathan family conveyed their anguish and incredulity as they struggled to come to terms with. Considering what had transpired, the arrest signaled the conclusion of a dark period in Sada's past. Yet, when Kehlani Jonathan's trial started in early December, the shock and agony would last for a long time. Reporters from publications like the Arizona Republic and True Crime crowded the courtroom in 2022, ready to report on the case's startling developments every week. With the prosecution leads by the assistant district, Kehlani was portrayed by lawyer Mark Christensen, 42, as a cunning and desperate individual who had put her own financial requirements over her son Christensen's childhood, who is renowned for his keen intelligence. Kehlani's acts, according to relentless pursuit of justice, were planned and motivated by avarice. Cited Kehlani's own confession, the text messages, and the phone logs as indisputable proof. In response to Kehlani's guilt, the defense team, led by public defender Carmen Vasquez, 28, presented Kehlani as a distressed mother who had committed a grave error. Vasquez, an experienced lawyer known for compassion, stressed Kehlani's financial situation and contended that she had no intention of killing Jonathan. Between her desperate attempt to provide her family with a brighter future and the reality that Jonathan's, Vasquez appealed to the jury's compassion, requesting that they take Kehlani's accidental death into consideration. Challenging conditions and the strain she endured during the trial, which Jonathan's family observed, His family had been split apart by his mother's deeds, and the anguish was seen in there. With tears in their eyes, the prosecution made a compelling case, but the defense struck a chord with a few jurors for mercy. On December 15, 2022, the jury decided that Kelani Jonathan had committed involuntary manslaughter. Jonathan had died as a result of Kelani's activities, but there was insufficient proof to show that she had planned to murder him. As the verdict was delivered, the courtroom became quiet, and Kelani showed little emotion. The judge gave Kelani a 10-year prison term, and her face remained expressionless and colorless. Reactions to the punishment were divided, with some feeling that the prospect of release after 5 years. Some thought it was fair in light of Jonathan's untimely death, while others thought it was too mild. Because of Kelani's dire situation, Jonathan's family received little consolation from the ruling. Must confront the truth that their loved one was abducted by the one who was meant to. The community of Sedona was also left to deal with the upsetting events that had transpired in order to protect him. Among them is a clear illustration of how desperation and greed may result in unimaginable acts. In the months after Kelani Jonathan was sentenced, the case's effects were still very much felt. The trial had a profound impact on all those involved in the Sedona community. Kelani Jonathan was sent to the Arizona State Prison Complex, according to the Jonathan family. Kelani encountered a difficult situation while incarcerated at Perryville, a high-security institution close to Phoenix. Environment: her situation had garnered a lot of media interest, and she was frequently the focus of. Despite rumors and criticism from other prisoners, the jail system provided her with little opportunities for assistance and rehabilitation, allowing her to consider the terrible outcomes of her actions. During her incarceration, Kelani took part in drug treatment programs, abuse, and mental health conditions in the hopes of finding atonement and becoming ready for her final release. In spite of the chaos, Sedona's life progressively returned to normal. The community hosted a memorial service for Jonathan at a nearby park, which was attended by locals, friends, and family who want to pay tribute to him. The occasion included speeches and live music honoring Jonathan's life and goals. It provided the poignant reminder of the young guy whose life was cut short. Community: an opportunity to unite and offer mutual support in relation to the case's media coverage ultimately diminished to make room for fresh tales and advancements, but Jonathan's passing's influence and the trial that followed remained a moving reminder of the repercussions. Everyone affected by the terrible events of October 2021 is feeling the effects of desperation and greed.